Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 21st, and this is In Case You Missed American History. Well, if you're watching this, that means you couldn't make the class today, and that is okay. I hope you're well. Hope those around you are well. Hope that you are staying warm during, hopefully, this last little cold stretch that we're having. So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to run you through the couple of slides that we talked about today and get you any reminders or anything you might need. Okay, so first thing on the docket today is a quick reminder that you have that assignment World War I from home, is what I called it, due on Monday at midnight. Again, Monday is going to be an asynchronous day. You guys don't have to come in for anything on Monday this time, unlike last week where you guys took all that Aspire testing. You just got to get that done by Monday. I'm going to make sure you get plenty of work time this week, so if you don't have extra time to work on it today, don't worry. You'll have some time Thursday and Friday toward the end of class to get those things done. Another reminder, any old work that is late is getting entered as zeros in the grade book. So any old work that's late is getting entered as zeros in the grade book, and obviously that's having a negative effect on things. Now, if your families go in and look at Infinite Campus, they can see those zeros. You can see those zeros. So get that stuff taken care of soon, and I will get it graded for you. Now, on the Infinite Campus, make sure that you are checking your stuff. I went in the other day and have everything entered. I think I have one late assignment someone turned in yesterday that I need to grade and get in there for you. I'll probably do that after this video. I also did an initial grade average. I don't trust Infinite Campus to figure out your grades because it does some weird things. So I go in and average your grades and come up with the things that you should have. So go and take a look at that if you haven't. Get all the stuff made up you need. If you have questions about any of that stuff, please make sure to let me know, like if you don't have the test link, for instance. Okay. Today, what we're going to look at World War I expanding, and then we're going to talk a little bit about trench warfare. And then if you have any other time that you can spend on American history today, I would use that to do some work, get some stuff done. And as always, if you have questions, please make sure and reach out and ask. Okay. All right, let's get on to the information slides. Okay, so yesterday we talked about the reasons why the war happened. We talked a little bit about Europe in 1914 and then the reasons why the war happened. And I used the word mania for that. Militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and an assassination. Now that assassination was the Archduke of a country called Austria-Hungary, this one of these orange countries right here in the middle, was killed by a Serbian terrorist. Now, take in mind that Serbian terrorist had no link to the government. That Serbian terrorist was acting on behalf of a terrorist group. His name was Gavrilo Princip. When he killed the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, this started a problem between the two countries. Now, I don't know if this is really truly fair. I wasn't around to know, obviously, the whole story and what was going on. But that's Austria-Hungary, blames Serbia for the assassination. Serbia's response, more or less, is, look, it wasn't the government, it wasn't the military, it was a terrorist group. We're as disappointed as you are. We're disappointed that a Serbian person did this, but it was not us, and so they don't apologize. And Austria-Hungary basically goes, well, you need to apologize or we're going to have a problem, and Serbia refuses. Okay. And so Austria-Hungary looks around and they go to their biggest ally, their biggest buddy in the world, their neighbor to the north, Germany, and they go, hey, listen, our next in line to rule was killed by a Serbian terrorist. The Serbians won't apologize. They refuse to take responsibility for the killing. We're thinking we may declare war on them. And Austria-Hungary looks at the leader of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and says, hey, if we declare war on them, what can we expect from you as our ally? And Kaiser Wilhelm II offers them what is known as the blank check. Now, if you don't know what a blank check is, okay, check, bank account check. What happens with a blank check is it's not truly blank, because what happens with that is I sign. If I give you a blank check, I sign it, Christopher M. Seep, boom, and I hand it to you. What does that give you access to? Think for a second. If you know what a blank check is, you know the answer is it's whatever I have in my account. You can have whatever I have. Okay, so if I have $1 million in my bank account, you could write that check out for $1 million to yourself. Boom, they give you all my money. And when Germany offers the blank check, they're not just offering money. They're not offering supplies. They're not offering weapons. They're basically saying, we have your back in whatever you need us to do. And that is enough to give Austria-Hungary enough confidence that they go to Serbia one more time and say, hey, we're expecting an apology. Serbia says, well, you can hold your breath until you turn blue because it's not coming. And Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Serbia declares war back. My lights just went off. Give me a second. There we go. Okay. And what happens is a chain of events that pulls most European countries into the war. Now, if you take a look at that map that I have over on the side, I want to point out a couple of things about that. There are kind of three colors of countries on the map. The yellow or tan ones are neutral. So you're looking at Spain, Albania, Switzerland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden. I believe I hit all the neutrals. They stay out of the war. They do not choose a side. They do not get involved. Okay, Switzerland is always in a very interesting position to stay neutral. We have the purpley colors. Again, I'm a little colorblind, so I hope that's right. Those are your allies. Now, your allied countries join on the side of Serbia, and it's kind of a chain reaction that causes this to happen. Serbia's big friend in the world is Russia, and they are big. And so when Serbia declares war on Austria-Hungary and Germany, the Russians declare war back. Well, Russia's big friend in the world is France, and France declares war. Now, when the Germans decide to attack France, they march through neutral Belgium. When the Germans march through Belgium, Belgium's big friend in the world is the UK or England, and so they declare war. And so you have this situation where two countries, Austria-Hungary and Serbia, pull all of the major countries in Europe into this war. And so it's kind of like teams getting chosen. It's kind of like people dividing up, with the tan or yellow countries saying, we're going to stay out of this because we don't have I would say a dog in the fight, meaning they don't have anything to gain or to lose. And so the war begins. In 1914, the Allies and the Central Powers, again, Allies purple, Central Powers orange, declare war on each other, and the fighting begins. But when you look at this map, you realize that right away Germany has a pretty big problem in this war, and Austria-Hungary as well. But Germany more than either, because Germany's military is really who's going to do most of the fighting for the Central Powers. Now, if you look at that map, I think you probably see what it is. They're fighting in two directions, so they have to fight punch this way and punch this way. And as you know, in real life, it's not an action movie. It's not like the movies where bad guys attack one at a time and the good guy sits in the middle of the circle and they come one at a time. It doesn't work like that. And so Germany, countries have plans. I'm sure that somewhere in Washington, D.C., there's a plan for how we invade Mexico, how we invade Canada. What happens if Canada invades? What happens if we have to go to war with Zimbabwe? Okay. They have a lot of this stuff already thought of so that if it happens, we can just right into action. So the Germans had a first strike plan for a situation where they got into a fight with France and Russia. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. Now, the Schlieffen Plan has a lot of ifs to it, okay? The Germans believed their first if is if Russia declares war on us, it's going to take them a long time to get organized. They thought about 6 weeks because Russia's so big, they're a little disorganized. They're going to have to pull people from all over the country. They're going to have to get supplies together. So they believe that if Russia declares war, they're going to have time. So they think if they're fighting Russia and France at the same time, they should go after France first. All right. So they're going to pull what's called a hammer pivot. Imagine swinging a hammer and missing the nail and coming around. So almost like a big throwing motion in baseball. They're going to go and they're going to fight France. And then when they defeat France, they're going to come back around and they're going to fight the Russians. Okay. Now, the next part about the Schlieffen Plan is that the Germans are going to try to defeat France by encircling Paris, the capital and most important city, and getting the country to surrender because it's choking off the big city and the national government. But in order to get into France, they're going to march through neutral Belgium. Now, this is a big if, because Belgium is neutral. You're not supposed to march through neutral countries. Germans figured if they did that, the Belgians would be like, that's fine, go ahead, walk through, have fun. Save some croissants for us, okay? But that's not what happened. When the Germans marched into neutral Belgium, the Belgians went, hey, you can't do this. And when the Germans said, hey, we're just marching through, we're not doing anything, the Belgians started shooting and they declared war. This slowed the Germans down. Now, not a ton. It's Belgium, no offense to any Belgians out there that may be watching. They're known for chocolate, waffles, and they've got some pretty good soccer players, I think, and hockey players, if I remember correctly. But that slows them down. And when they get into France, just north of Paris, the Russians are ready to fight. And so the Germans have to break off and send part of their soldiers back east. I had to point the wrong way to get that to work. All right, back east. And so the Germans don't get to follow through on their plan. They dig in and fight a big first battle of World War I called the Battle of the Marne, where hundreds of thousands of people die in like 9 days and literally almost no land is gained. A stalemate begins. Now, a stalemate is when neither side is winning or losing. You hear it a lot in like chess or checkers when the game is unwinnable, that it's a stalemate, and they just go, okay, fine, we're calling it a draw, okay? And the fighting gets bloody and it gets weird because the weapons have advanced beyond the military leaders' planning. And so they're fighting. They want to line up like they did in former wars and shoot at each other, but there's machine guns and there's flamethrowers and there's all these things. And so they have to come up with a way to keep men alive. And so they developed this idea called trench warfare, okay? And what happens is they dig trench systems, or like you can see in this German trench on the Eisk, is they basically dig man-depth ditches to hide in that would have sandbags along the top, and you would aim your gun out the top, and possibly they even dug little holes where you didn't have to stick your head above, and you would shoot across, and the other trench might be 50 yards away, 100 yards away, 200 yards away. And if anybody poked their head up, bam. Okay? The trenches were used as a defense system, and at the same time, they were used as a way to save the lives of your own soldiers. When one side decided they wanted to attack the other, usually there was a whistle blown or some kind of signal, and all the men would get up out of, like, let's say our trench, and we would grab our rifles and all those things, and we would run across to the other side, shooting along the way, maybe throwing hand grenades. Hand grenades are a little bit different back then. They're called stick grenades. And we're going to throw those, and we're going to try to take over the opposing side's trench. Now, if we do that, they probably fall back to another trench they already have dug back further. And then they'll try and take back their trench tomorrow. But if we don't get into their trench or we don't win it, we retreat back to our trench. And then they may attack us. And so on and so forth. Every day at these different battles, winning ground, losing ground, stalemating, people dying, okay? And a lot of the war is fought using artillery, which are like large caliber cannons, for lack of a better word, and the men going over the top. Now, that's what they call like running out of the trench. Now, you can't see it in this picture because apparently this trench didn't have it, but sometimes they had barbed wire in the front, and that barbed wire was razor wire, and they'd have gaps. Well, that was so you could run out, but also that was so your opponent could run in, because at the gaps in the barbed wire, that's where you would position your machine guns. Machine guns are by far the most deadly weapon of this war, because if they hit you in a limb, we're still in a time in history where we're doing a lot of amputations. And so you didn't even really have to aim. You just had to hit someone with the machine gun. Now, if someone got shot out in no man's land, the area in between the trenches where no one wanted to be, they could be stuck out there. And obviously, there were dead bodies out there. There were parts of dead bodies. Because of the supply of dead bodies and the supply of mud, rats are everywhere. They call them corpse rats. They're giant, like flesh-eating, gross, horror movie level bad guys out in the middle eating people. Okay? Now, The modern weapons really changed the war, though. Kind of already gave you a little look at the machine gun and what it does. You're probably looking at a 2 to 3 person crew to fire a machine gun. You have artillery making a big difference. Tanks happen in World War One. The first one is, I believe, used at the Battle of the Somme in 1917. Tanks are not what we know them as today. They were large. They were slow. They were more designed for like knocking down barbed wire and getting through mud. They didn't necessarily have large cannons on them. Some of them had small side mount guns. They broke down really easy. They were really slow. They weren't necessarily blast proof, but they were definitely an innovation that changed the way people did things. Maybe the most feared weapon of the war was poison gas. As you can see, these two guys with the machine gun down here are wearing gas masks. Poison gas was used by both sides in the war. I think the Germans used it first, but then obviously the Allies started to use it as well. There were a number of different kinds of poison gas. One that was like a yellowy green color that if it hit you in the eyes would blind you. Another that caused almost like instantaneous, like fatal pneumonia, where people's lungs would start to fill up with liquid. It would itch. And if your lungs itch, you're going to cough, and you start to cough so violently, you almost start to cough up chunks of your own lung, and you drown in your own blood. Terrible, terrible way to go. The blindness, the death by internal strangulation, drowning, were so feared that the men, carried these gas masks with them everywhere they went. The other scary thing about poison gas is it's heavier than air, so it's going to settle into low spots. And so if you think about it, look at this picture up here. Where's the low spot? It's the trench. And so if gas gets into that trench, you've got to get out of that trench. And that makes you a target for anybody who's within shooting range of you. You also had Zeppelins that were used for different things. Zeppelin is like a blimp. Sometimes they were used for spotting. Sometimes they were used to drop bombs. They're slow moving. They're big targets. Airplanes, though, came to kind of like an important place in this war. Airplanes were originally used, they're propeller planes, sometimes carrying one person with a timed machine gun that wouldn't shoot off your propeller. And originally they were used in dogfights. Dogfights were one-on-one battles. If you ever saw like old Snoopy cartoons, you always had Snoopy going up and fighting against the Red Baron, okay? Now, the Red Baron was actually a real person. His name was Manfred von Richthofen. He was a German. He was a leader of a group of pilots called the Flying Circus. And Manfred von Richthofen was probably the most famous dogfight pilot in World War I. The Americans also had a famous dogfight pilot named Eddie Rickenbacker, who shot down, I believe, 26 German planes. But the real innovation comes when a guy famous with Wisconsin named Billy Mitchell, Mitchell Field is named after him. Billy Mitchell lived in Wisconsin for part of his life, goes, why do we keep sending these planes up one at a time? Why don't we send up like 50 at a time and bomb? And they go, ooh, cool, what would we call it? And they're like, what if we call it an Air Force? I don't know. And the Air Force is born. Now, originally the Air Force was part of the Army. It was actually called the Army Air Service, all right? But the idea of using mass planes to mass bomb comes about in World War I. Now, that's really kind of everything we went through today, okay? I kind of clipped through some things. I'm sure in class I asked some questions, but I wanted to make sure you guys got the main bits of information. So if you have any questions, please make sure and let me know. If you have other time planned for American history today, get going on World War I from home. Take it easy. Have a good day. I'll see you soon.